You are losing something right now. And the strange part is you can't feel it happening. Not your money, not your time. Well, actually, yes, your time. But that's not even the main thing. What's actually being taken is something harder to name. Something closer to who you are. The way you think. The things you want. The reasons you do anything at all. And once you start noticing it, really noticing it, it becomes almost impossible to unsee. There's this idea most people have about themselves. That their opinions are theirs. That what they like, what they believe, what they find funny or beautiful or worth caring about. That all of that came from them, from their experiences, from thinking things through. But here's the thing. For Gen Z, for people who grew up with the internet basically inside their heads, that's almost never true. And most people in that generation have no idea just how deep that goes. Think about it for a second. Every preference you have was shaped by something. Every aesthetic you're drawn to, every political lean, every sense of humor, everything you find cringe, none of that appeared out of nowhere. It was installed slowly. Over years of content, algorithms, comment sections, trends, and the quiet pressure of watching what gets rewarded and what gets buried, which is fine, right? Every generation gets shaped by their environment. That's just how humans work. But here's where it starts to get different. Previous generations were shaped by things that were at least passive. TV, music, newspapers. Those things influenced people, sure, but they weren't designed to. They weren't optimized in real time to figure out exactly what kept your attention and then give you more of it at an accelerating rate. The algorithm is not passive. The algorithm is active. It's learning you constantly, and it's not learning you to understand you. It's learning you to keep you. There's a difference, a big one, and this is the part nobody really talks about. When you spend years inside a system that is actively figuring out what triggers your emotions, what makes you angry, what makes you feel seen, what gives you a little hit of validation, and then feeding you more of that on a loop, you start to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly your brain starts to expect that. It starts to crave it, and eventually it starts to organize itself around it. Bro, think about that for a second. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to function inside an attention economy, and nobody asked your permission. Here's a scenario that's probably more familiar than you'd want to admit. You're lying in bed. It's late. You're not even really watching anything. You're just scrolling, and somewhere in the back of your head that you should stop, that you're tired, that nothing on your screen is actually making you feel good. But you keep going anyway, not because you're enjoying it, because stopping feels weirdly uncomfortable. That discomfort, that pull to keep scrolling even when there's nothing to find, that's not laziness. That's not weakness. That's a system working exactly as it was designed to, because the goal of these platforms was never to give you what you want. The goal is to keep you on the platform. And the most efficient way to do that is to make the absence of the platform feel bad. Not to make the platform feel amazing, just to make leaving feel slightly worse than staying. That's a subtle distinction, but it changes everything about how you understand what's happening to you. And this is where it gets into something deeper, because it's not just attention that's being shaped. It's something closer to identity. Gen Z grew up during a period when the internet wasn't just a tool you used. It was the environment you developed in. The years when you're figuring out who you are, what you value, how you relate to other people. For this generation, a massive portion of that happened online. In comment sections, in group chats, in the feedback loop of posting something and seeing how people respond to it. And that feedback loop is not neutral. When you post something and it gets engagement, likes, comments, shares, your brain logs that this version of you is acceptable. This works. When something gets ignored or worse, gets criticized, your brain logs that that version didn't land. Adjust. Over time, without anyone explicitly telling you what to be, you start to perform a version of yourself that is optimized for approval, not consciously, just gradually. The edges that don't get rewarded get sanded down. The parts that generate positive response response get amplified. And guys, that's actually kind of terrifying when you sit with it, because you end up not even knowing how much of your personality is yours and how much of it is just what worked online. But here's where it gets weird. This wouldn't be so strange if the feedback you were getting was from people who actually knew you. If your friends, real ones, who understood your context, were the ones responding to what you put out, that kind of feedback, even if it shapes you, is at least grounded in real relationship. But most of the feedback Gen Z gets is from strangers. Thousands of them, sometimes. People who don't know your history, your circumstances, your actual self. People who are responding to a compressed, curated version of you. A caption, a clip, a pose, and whose judgment you're using to calibrate who you are. That's a strange way to build a self. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that this generation isn't just distracted. They're developing inside a fundamentally different kind of social environment than any generation before them. And nobody has any idea what that does to a person long term. There's also something happening to the way Gen Z processes disagreement. And this one's subtle, but it matters. The internet, especially the algorithmic internet, is very good at one thing reinforcing whatever you already believe. Not because of some conspiracy, just because content that confirms your existing view feels good and content that challenges it feels bad. And the algorithm has figured out that giving you what feels good keeps you on the platform longer. So over years of that, something shifts. Disagreement starts to feel less like a normal part of thinking and more like an attack. Encountering an idea that contradicts yours doesn't trigger curiosity, it triggers defensiveness, because your brain has been trained passively to experience ideological challenge as a threat. And this is where it starts to connect to something bigger, because a generation that can't sit with disagreement, that experiences being wrong as something to be avoided rather than something to learn from, is a generation that becomes very, very easy to manipulate. You just have to figure out what they already believe and confirm it loudly, repeatedly, with enough emotional intensity to keep them engaged, which is exactly what a lot of content and a lot of politics does. Here's the thing nobody wants to say directly. Gen Z is not uniquely naive or uniquely stupid. That's not what this is. Every generation had its version of manipulation, propaganda, advertising, ideological pressure. None of this is new in the sense that people have always been shaped by forces outside themselves. What's new is the scale and the speed and the precision, because the tools that are shaping this generation are not blunt instruments. They're not billboards or TV commercials that say the same thing to everyone. They're individually calibrated. They know your specific emotional triggers. They know what kind of content makes you specifically feel angry or validated or afraid. And they use that at a level of granularity that has never existed before in human history. And that's not paranoia. That's just what targeted advertising and algorithmic content delivery are by design. The technology is real. The effect is real. And most people living inside it have almost no framework for understanding what it's doing to them. So what does that leave you with? Not a clean answer. There isn't one. You can't just delete your apps and suddenly become a person who thinks freely and clearly. The shaping has already happened to some degree. The question is just whether you're aware of it. And awareness, just the act of noticing, changes the relationship slightly, not completely, but slightly. When you feel that pull to keep scrolling even though nothing's good, and you recognize it as a designed response rather than a natural one, something shifts. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to create a small gap between the stimulus and the reaction, between what the system wants you to do and what you actually choose to do. That gap is small, but it might be the most important real estate in your entire life right now, because everything that makes you actually you, your actual values, your actual curiosity, your actual sense of what matters, lives in that gap, or it doesn't live anywhere. I think about this sometimes while playing. There's something about Minecraft, the way it's open, unstructured, not trying to keep you, that feels different from everything else. Like the game isn't optimizing for your engagement. It's just there. You decide what to do with it. And that that feels increasingly rare. Most things you interact with now are trying to do something to you, trying to make you feel something, want something, click something, share something. The agenda is always there, even when it's invisible. And maybe the first step is just noticing when something has an agenda, not with paranoia, just with a kind of quiet attention, like, who built this? What do they want from me? Is what I'm feeling right now something I actually feel, or is it something I've been guided toward? Those questions don't have to be dramatic. They don't have to lead anywhere specific. But a generation that asks them is a fundamentally different thing than a generation that doesn't. And I don't know if Gen Z is that generation yet. I think some of them are getting there slowly, in quiet moments away from the feed. Maybe like this one.